Are you thinking about starting a company with a family member? This week on Bootstrapped the Lighter Side, Tony and Jordan Berry, the father and son founders of Interloop Data, share their origin story and the rules of the road for managing a startup with family members. They share insights on how they scaled their startup, found product market fit, built a sales team, and maintained ownership with non-dilutive funding. Welcome to Bootstrapped, the Lighter Side, the podcast for B2B startup founders wanting to achieve success without giving up ownership or control. This podcast is brought to you by Lighter Capital, the leader in founder-friendly financing for B2B SaaS companies. Learn more at lightercapital.com. Welcome, Jordan Berry and Tony Berry, to the podcast. I'm so happy to have you here. We'll start off with if you can tell us a little bit about your company, but then we want to talk about the origin story because you're unique among our founders. I think this is a first for us. So let's start with telling us what Interloop does.
Happy to. So Jordan Berry with Interloop. Our mission is to help companies achieve more with data. And so data is really a kind of a buzzword these days. People are all excited about data and AI. And really what we help companies do is take all the data from across their different systems, unify it in one place and in one format so that they can then query it, analyze it, put AI on top of it. So all those awesome, ambitious things that companies are trying to do these days, we're really the foundation that helps them get there.
Great. And do you have a specific vertical that you target?
We have verticals that we've happened into, I guess is the way we put it.
Okay.
So not everybody needs, we're finding what we do data perspective. So we have pockets in manufacturing, distribution, and financial services. We'd love to say that was completely by intent, but it wasn't completely. But like a true startup, you go where the customers are at. But we're starting to now do more vertical focus. So.
And you are coming to us from one of my favorite towns, Charleston, South Carolina, and you both have the same last names. So are you brothers? Cousins?
We used to, when it was just audio only, we would joke that we were brothers, but obviously with video, that's a little hard to say. So probably by the gray hair can tell I'm the father and Jordan is the son.
So tell us how that came about, because I think we have lots of husband-wife teams, we have sibling teams. Lighter Capital's funded, I think, close to 600 companies now, but you're our first parent-child team.
Well, I joke with Jordan that he's the reason we have this startup. So I was a happy 50-year-old doing what you do, which is you go out and you do management consulting. And so I was helping in the CRM space. But then Jordan can share. He came up with an idea that he presented to me, and I'll let you share that, Jordan. And we, out of that, formed a company.
Yeah, so interesting backstory and entry point. There aren't so many father-son tech startups, that kind of thing, but we were really enamored with AI about a decade ago. So I know AI is all the rage today. This was back in the IBM Watson era, if you recall, all the commercials on TV and the Jeopardy, Ken Jennings run and all that fun stuff. So at the time, we started to build some AI solutions that didn't look too dissimilar from what GPT and some of them are doing today, but it was kind of based on the Moneyball movie. So the idea of using statistics to accurately predict what's going to happen. We thought we could do the same thing for salespeople. So taking all that great CRM data in tools like Salesforce, using statistics and AI to predict, which deals they should pursue, which ones they should not pursue, that type of thing. And so what's interesting is AI needs a lot of data. And so when we went to market, we realized that, to create an effective AI, you need to bring your data together. And so we actually then pivoted the company and really focused on that. But early days, Tony and I would always like to talk shop kind of in the evenings, that type of thing. I was in Chicago. He was flying in and out of New York. And I think I pitched this concept to him at one point. There were a couple of clients that we thought might bite, and we got one to sign a contract and looked at each other and said, "Hey, maybe we should start a company." So that was the.
I think I said, "There's no way this can work," and so I showed it to a couple of the companies that I knew, and darn if they didn't, it didn't work, and darn if they didn't want to buy it. And so then we realized we had to form the company. But yeah, Jordan's right. The big thing we found is that the data challenge for AI was the actual problem. So I think the lesson we learned there is you can get enamored with your product, but you got to listen to what customers are actually asking for. And they kept asking us, well, can you clean up my data so your AI can be better? And we realized, oh, that's the market opportunity, is that data prep. So Jordan had to build a second version of the product that focused on this idea of data unification.
Okay, so this was really a case of, Jordan, you had the idea, you knew that Tony, your dad, can sell and has a lot of great business experience. So he was the first one you thought about when you were thinking co-founder, or is it because you knew he could fund the business initially?
A little bit of both. I mean, we've got a good yin and yang, so I think there's a good combination there. And yeah, to Tony's point, it was a little bit accidental, but one of the better decisions we've made. So excited to be working with him every day and learn from him, every day, even today. So
Same.
yeah.
And you've had so much success. Tell us some of the learnings there, and we'll go into company-specific learnings, but I first want to talk about the father-son dynamic, family members working together learnings, things that you'd advise others who are thinking of going on this journey, or things you wish you had done differently at the outset.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I'll let Jordan give his thoughts too. When we started this, as he mentioned, he was in Chicago, I was flying to New York, so we weren't located together. And we realized that was a big stress point. That's actually how we ended up in Charleston. We knew we had to get co-located. So we were such a small team. We both liked Charleston, so we up and moved. He did, we did. So we moved to Charleston and started essentially the company there, which was one of the better moves I think we made. And early on, I would say we didn't do a great job of separating the family dynamic from the business dynamic, and we had to learn how to do that. And Jordan, maybe you can share kind of the code words he uses, so I know whether I'm dad or I'm co-founder in terms of the conversations. But it was a neat rule he kind of came up with.
Yeah, you'll often hear me say Tony in this podcast, but that's kind of the idea. Is it's Tony in any sort of professional setting versus dad in the family session. So I think it's important to kind of have that mental separation and to be able to signal to each other, like, whether this is an intense debate from a professional standpoint or whether we're just having a good old family pushback. So there's kind of give and take there, but yeah, I would say overall, in addition to just kind of setting those boundaries up front, just being able to not talk shop all the time was a good thing as well. We often caught ourselves doing that, where we'd be on family vacation and, it's too easy to fall back into that, but kind of forcing yourself to create that room for family time versus kind of constantly, working on the business. But
that is tough. The software business I started with my now husband. He was my boyfriend at the time, and we were living together. And before we had an office, we started in the house, and that was like, he was very much like, at 6 o'clock, just shut up about the business. We're not, but he had to put those boundaries in. But it is tough, especially you're living and breathing a startup in the early days. Okay, talk to us a little bit about, Tony, you worked mainly in large companies before doing this. So this isn't, Jordan, you didn't grow up in this entrepreneurial family where it was a given you were going to do this. So what gave you really the courage to take the leap, or did you just not know how hard it would be and just jumped in like most entrepreneurs?
A little bit of that, but we've joked is there's probably a book here somewhere, but I was at a point where I had gotten tired of being in a large organization. So I'd gone out and essentially was a freelance consultant at the time. So I was making that change. Jordan you were a few years out of school at that point, kind of knew what he didn't want to do, which was being inside a big company. So it was the right time for both of us to take this kind of chance. And so glad we did, because it's been not easy, but it's certainly far from boring and is most days actually quite fun, quite exciting. Most days, right? I think we're having one of those. Today's been a pretty good day, so we're not doing too bad today.
Yeah, it's the roller coaster, right? Yeah. What do you think Interloop does really well, and things that you would say, to someone just starting a business, here's what we really nailed, and we'll share these learnings with you, and then we'll get into, what you wish you had done differently.
I think we've finally formulated these as our core values in words, and we're starting to kind of build that culture with the team. But I think for us, it was just being client first at the very beginning. Our clients have problems that are challenging and keeping them from achieving their goals. And so we've just been truly dedicated to solving pure problems. And so that's kind of been part of our ethos throughout the entire journey. We're a tech-enabled services company, so we have both a product as well as professional services. And so being able to take, a toolkit and apply it to a problem does take a lot of critical thinking and kind of understanding. And so I think that's something that we've been really good out the gate is, being empathetic with the customer, understanding their day-to-day, figuring out how to take what is kind of a generic tool and apply it to their world and what they do. And I think we've taught our team how to do that as well. And so it's starting to amplify, which is really exciting. At times we get a little too into the engineering. That's kind of our nature, but I think that's one thing that we've really carried throughout, and it's helped, with the longevity of the company.
In terms of being customer focused and customer centric, it is really a competitive barrier to entry. I look at a lot of companies that were successful in their space, Southwest Airlines, Nordstrom, Amazon, there's nothing really proprietary about what they do, but they just did customer different than their competitors. But so everybody talks about that, but how do you implement it, and how do you get that permeated throughout the culture?
So it's funny. We talk about it a lot. Like Jordan said, we've got our core values up on the wall now, but we make sure our team knows what we mean by client first. And that doesn't mean client's always right. Doesn't mean we're always going to please the customer, but it's being honest, transparent, and at times frank. Sometimes with data, there's an expectation of things that just aren't achievable. And we've taught our team, you've got to be comfortable with having that uncomfortable conversation, because that's really what customer first is about, is telling them when something is not the right idea or not the right way to go. And a lot of people think that's not customer first because it's not a pleasant conversation, but it's super important because you are putting them, in front. We've had a couple of situations where we've actually walked away from business because we just weren't the right fit, and that doesn't feel like customer first, but it really is, right? Because you want to do right by them.
Okay, learnings, things that you wish you had done differently.
Lots of them. You want to start, Jordan? I've got a couple, but
What comes to mind is we tried to do kind of everything. And I think what we learned is we have strengths and weaknesses, and it's so much better to double, triple down on your strengths than it is to try and kind of spread yourself and cover all things. So I think if, early on, a couple of the areas that we weren't super strong in terms of marketing and things of that nature, bring someone in that's an expert in that, or outsource it. The DIY approach doesn't always get you as far as you think it will. Even if you're a bootstrap startup and really lean, investing in certain pieces of your business can really pay dividends. We burned lots of time and energy trying to create or solve things that an expert could do 10 times as fast. I think that was definitely a big learning for us early on.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of related to that too is we're starting to focus on, even down to our team, what are each of our members good at and what are they not good at, and making sure that we put teams together that complement each other, and really making sure we focus on, even Jordan and I now, we're both idea people, and we've realized recently that, hold on, that ideation is fantastic, but if we're both ideating and we both come up with different ideas, now that our team's bigger, they don't know which to follow. So we've now divided our roles. So Jordan focuses on our product, our direction, the things that we're doing. I'm doing more of the strategic planning, and some of the business development work. So we've separated our roles. So we ideate in our lane rather than confusing our team by ideating together.
So for a tech-enabled services, where I imagine it's a pretty consultative sale, probably longer sales cycle, but stickier once you're in.
Yep.
When do you bring in that first salesperson? Because you guys are the best ones to sell the product, right?
We're at that moment right now. So Jordan and I have really done the selling to date. We've gotten a little bit of help from a business development standpoint. This has been my learning from the past managing sales teams. You want to make sure you've got your sales process figured out before you bring a sales team in. First of all, it's a very expensive resource, and you want to get to the return on them quickly. So we're getting really close to where our motion is starting to make sense now. So we're going to start to bring in some salespeople. I think we'll still be, at least for the next few months, pretty heavily involved until we get that team onboarded, and then we'll start to scale it from there.
Right. Other early learnings. You talked about bringing in experts, earlier in areas where it's not your forte. What else would you have done differently?
One other thing that comes to mind for me is people understand product market fit and trying to bring an idea to the market, and kind of, the puzzle pieces clicking together. And I think when they think about that, they're often thinking about kind of pushing something into the world or kind of creating it. My biggest advice would be, find a movement. Find something that's already in motion. Find a community of people that are already trying to solve something, and jump into that wave and start solving problems with them. I know that was one of our early learnings too. Even AI 10 years ago, it was a toy, it was new, it was novel, it was cool, but there was movement around it like we see today. There was an entire education we had to take people through before they were willing to buy anything. And so I think if you can find people that are already self-educating, self-learning, they're going to be much more primed and ready to talk to you about how you can help them solve their problems than if you get the proverbial like, what are you even talking about? I know some of our some questions of you guys feel this feels like very complex and out there and lo and behold, 10 years later, I think the market's finally caught up. But the timing and the movement of the market to me is just as important as your idea or your product.
Yeah, we've spent a lot of time lately about kind of that ideal customer profile for us. And we're finding, and Jordan coined this term, we're looking for people that are data curious. Not everybody is. And so we realize that just like Jordan was saying, those that are not data curious, you're sitting there, you're educating. And at the end of the day, it's like they're not curious enough to go, try some of this. And now we're finding if we find those early adopters in this space that know they need to do AI, they want to figure it out, they know data's the challenge, they possibly even tried it and failed, they're data curious now, and now we're finding much better receptivity. So one of the first things we do in our qualification now is say, hey, do we have the right audience that we're even starting the sales engagement? And if we're not, then be comfortable with pointing them to some knowledge that's out in the universe, but then they're not a candidate for us right now. And we'll come back 6 months later and kind of pick that back up.
On that note, are most of your clients larger companies?
Interestingly, no, we're more focused on the mid-market and the upper mid-market, mainly because the Snowflakes, the Databricks of the world have that enterprise brand, but that doesn't come down to the mid-market very well. So we're finding we play there quite well.
And when you were selling into these mid and upper mid-market companies, is one of the challenges figuring out who the decision maker is? I came from a big bank and data was everywhere. And it was a problem everywhere. And we did actually have someone who was nominally in charge of data, but it was, where do you go?
Yeah, and that's a great point. And that's one of the challenges we've tried to navigate too, is we actually focus a bit more on the business side. So I think people traditionally think data, that's probably an IT function. But for most kind of department heads, they're using data every day. So whether it's head of sales or head of customer success or head of marketing, they need data to drive that function forward. And so a lot of times we kind of take a land and expand approach where, hey, let's help you understand your marketing metrics so that you can drive decision making. And then more time than not, another department kind of sees what Interloop's able to do. Hey, I want to. To your point, it's kind of finding the functional group within the larger organization that needs this problem, rather than going directly to IT departments and trying to be, part of their procurement process or things like that. But you got to really be able to poke the pain and kind of speak the same language of those functional leads. That's where we're trying to really hone in on our marketing messaging is, because the pain of a head of marketing is a little bit different than the pain of a salesperson or success. And yet they all need the data they need to drive their function forward.
Yeah, and that's why we love the upper mid market, because they tend to have an IT team, but like a big bank, they can't hire 20 data scientists, 10 data engineers, a developer. And so we sometimes become that kind of fractional team, and then that's on top of our platform. And so that's why we call it tech-enabled services. So we've thought all that out. And if we do it right, the IT team actually sees us as a companion to help this on the journey. Some of our most successful companies were almost an outsourced version of their IT team, with the Interloop platform being the subscription model. And it's super, super sticky, as you mentioned earlier, if we do it right.
So Jordan and Tony, any products or services on the horizon that you'd like to talk about?
I think Jordan's living and breathing this every day right now. So we'll let him share what he's got coming in October. So
yeah. And I know we kind of mentioned the movement that's happening. We're definitely seeing one in the data space. Not to do too much of a history lesson, but over the last couple of years, kind of Snowflake and Databricks have really been the main names in the data platform space, helping companies unify their data. But now most of the mid-market is starting to realize, hey, we need this too, but they don't have dedicated data teams to be able to handle all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so, we noticed this a couple of years ago. We were starting to build some tooling for these clients. Microsoft noticed too. And so we're a Microsoft partner, but they just released this last year a tool called Microsoft Fabric. They really pitch it as the data operating system. So just like you use Word and PowerPoint and Excel to do kind of day-to-day business, they've got data lakes and pipelines and notebooks that help you manage your data. So it's really meant to empower normal business users to take advantage of that. And what we found is it's a very powerful tool, but it's also very complex. And so actually we're excited, coming up soon, we're going to be launching what we call our data ops platform. It's called Mission Control. And so what it's really meant to do is help, leverage all of these really great tools in the data operating system, but adding that observability, monitoring, governance, all the things that the business actually cares about to make sure that, dashboards are up to date, that AI models are returning data that they should versus data that they shouldn't. So we're really excited about, the future of data ops and what that looks like. So, the data movement is here. We're trying to create the data ops movement for all people that are starting to leverage it.
That's great. Very exciting.
And we're really thrilled. Microsoft's been, interestingly, been very, very helpful. And so we're in some of their early programs to help an ISV like us, an independent software vendor, build solutions. And they have a big, big initiative to do billions of dollars with a B through the marketplace on this data stuff. So we want our piece of that $1 billion. So we're quite excited we think this is the next iteration of Interloop. This will be our next scale point.
Okay, let's talk about culture. How did you go about building one? Did you think about it? Were you deliberate in the early days, or is it something that developed on its own?
Early days, no, if we're being real honest. Right?
Which is very common.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
wanted to get a bunch of smart people in the room and solve
Yeah.
problems. But yeah, I would say especially this year, it's been, I would say every week, Jordan, right? We're talking about something cultural. What can we do to instill that culture, especially as we start to grow? We're realizing, we don't all fit in a room anymore. We're not all in the same location. And so now we do have to start really thinking about, what does culture look like? What does it feel like? How do we onboard people? That's an area of good learning there too, is we have aspirationally what we want to do onboarding, and we're not hitting on all cylinders there yet. So that's one of our next initiatives, because that kind of sets the culture, right? That first month really sets the culture for new employees.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about your financing strategy. So like so many of our companies, you're bootstrapped, which we love. You haven't given away, equity or control. How have you thought about that? Was that deliberate, or did you go out and try to talk to VCs and found it wasn't a good fit?
Yeah, it's funny. Early on, that the initial product that came out of an accelerator that we did, and we did go out and start getting some, or looked at some fundraising, and we actually got some really good advice from an angel who basically saw Jordan pitch Interloop once, and when we met with him, he started to see our financials, and he goes, "Well, gosh, you guys are making money.
Yeah.
You're cash flow positive. You haven't yet figured out." He said, "I don't think you figured out your product market fit." And he was completely right on that, because we had the wrong product at that time. And he said, "So you've got time to go figure this out." And so he said, "The best money you can get is money from customers. So go get more customers. And then from there, don't not look at debt vehicles and some of those other things, because you have a cash flow positive business. You may just want to ramp it." And so that's when we started looking at and found you. I think Jordan ran into Lowry at a show recently, right, or several years ago, and that's where the gestation started, because we were thinking about trying to fundraise again, and we realized, hold on, there may be another path.
Yeah. 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 It's still surprising that it's not known. VC is what is primarily written about and talked about, and every entrepreneur thinks that that's the path you have to take, even though it's a path that about 1% of tech companies take.
Well, and it's funny, and this is not a knock against accelerators, because we got lots of value, but
Yeah.
that's all you hear: go raise money, go raise money, go raise money. And thankfully, in hindsight, it's one of those things that didn't happen, because that was a little bit of the dip in the economy. And so I'm kind of glad we weren't successful in a weird way.
Yeah. And it's so much, I was a VC for a couple decades, but it just becomes the tail wagging the dog, because the goal is the next round.
Yep.
And a lot of times those align with building a good company. You think they should align perfectly, but not always, because it's like, what are we going to have to do to get that next round and get it at an up valuation versus, focus on what do we have to do to build a good company. Okay, so any other advice that you would like to give, not just for father-son teams, but for entrepreneurs looking to get into this? Best thing you ever did? Do you wish that, Jordan, do you wish you had like gone to McKinsey or, some other place? And Tony, do you wish you had stuck with your nice consulting company, low stress?
If we're being honest, on bad days, you do sometimes. We
Yeah.
talk a lot about that, opportunity cost of doing this and making sure, and we both talked about that, is making sure we think about, is this an exit strategy that we're trying to build here? Is it a lifestyle business? What are the outcomes that are acceptable? We're 7 years into this now, a little over 7 years. So you start thinking about that in terms of how I can go there. But yeah, I mean, that'd be my advice, is just realize there's always more than one option, and just make sure you're kind of thinking about those. And as you evaluate the business, kind of look at that and making sure it's sending you in the direction you want to go, but there's more than one path there.
And maybe a little bit different from my side, but to me, there's every time a customer says, "Oh, I used Interloop to do this," or "I used Interloop I get a little giddy inside, and it's
Yeah.
First time and the second time, obviously natural. We're on the 500th time, but it's still like it hits in a different way. And it's just not something that I had felt my previous management consulting career is. You're part of a bigger machine. You don't really feel that direct impact, but it's pretty cool to originate something, have it create value for a customer, and then have them start to talk about it and tell others. And it's a high that you can't really get elsewhere outside of the entrepreneurial community, and that definitely drives us. It's you have pride in what you're delivering for customers and the value it's creating, and then to see team members having that same experience, it's just it kind of expands and builds. And so I would definitely, for those that are willing to jump into the entrepreneurial pool, it can be good and hot and cold, but more hot than cold a lot of times. So
It is such a rush seeing people use your product and talk about it. I think I got that rush the first time I had a hair accessories business when I was in college, and being in lecture halls and seeing the backs of heads with I love that. I don't think I'll ever feel as good about a product, even though I've done software companies since as I felt during that. But anyway, well, thank you so much, Jordan and Tony. You are an inspiration, and I've had a chance to, like I said at the beginning, meet you guys in person. And besides being successful entrepreneurs, you're just great guys. So
great. Well, we look forward to October, getting a chance to catch up again.
Yeah, and Boulder for the Lighter Capital CEO Summit. We're looking forward to that too.
Great. Well, thanks for the time, Alyssa.
thanks for having us.
Thank you. Thank you again to Tony Berry and Jordan Berry. If you would like to learn more about Interloop, you can visit them at interloopdata.com, interloopdata.com. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Bootstrapped, the Lighter Side. To receive future episodes, subscribe using your favorite podcast platform. And if you enjoy this show, please share it with other fellow founders and entrepreneurs. For more insights, helpful tips, and to learn more about founder-friendly financing options, visit us at lightercapital.com. That's LIGHTERCAPITAL.com.